Here's part 1 of your requested long video script, 10 paragraphs, 5,000 characters. I'll continue with part 2 and part 3 after this. Part 1. You won't believe what happened in the dusty little town that prided itself on silence and order. On that scorching afternoon, people gathered under the blazing sun, muttering nervously, when she whispered those strange words. They wanted to shave, in the middle of town. At first, it sounded absurd, even laughable, but the look on her face made it clear, this wasn't some passing joke. This was something deeper, something that made even the rancher, a man who had seen storms and bandits and betrayals, stop in his tracks. When he went to check for himself, what he found made his entire body stiffen like stone. The town had always lived under unspoken rules. Out here, everyone knew their place. The barber had his little shop by the church, the preacher had his pulpit, and the sheriff his badge. But what rattled people that day was not about haircuts or razors. It was about defiance. A group of strangers had arrived, men and women dressed in ragged coats, their faces sharp with hunger and something else, rebellion. Instead of stepping politely into the barber's door, they set up a chair right in the middle of the dusty main street, placing a mirror on a crate as though they owned the ground beneath their boots. At first, people chuckled. A shave in the street. Maybe these were fools who had lost their way, or maybe drunks looking for attention. But when one of the strangers drew out a gleaming straight razor and announced loudly that no town law could tell them where a man might clean his face, the laughter died. Folks exchanged nervous looks. It wasn't about shaving anymore. It was about control, about daring the law to stop them. And in that silence, the rancher stepped forward, his shadow long and heavy against the dirt. He wasn't the sheriff, nor did he wear any badge, but everyone knew his presence was heavier than iron. He had carved his life into these plains, raised cattle against droughts, buried friends in the hard soil, and fought wolves with his own hands. When he checked, his eyes fell on the strangers, and for the first time in many years, he froze. Not because he was scared of their blades, but because of the insignia scratched on their belts, an old, faded mark he hadn't seen in decades. That mark belonged to a group he thought long gone, a roaming brotherhood of outlaws who once declared they would tear down every symbol of order in the West. Years ago, they vanished after being hunted down, their leaders hung in front of cheering crowds. Yet here they were, bold enough to return, and bold enough to make their stand by performing the simplest act, shaving, in the middle of town. A small rebellion, but one layered with symbolism, a taunt that said, "We cut away your rules, just as we cut away this beard." The townsfolk could feel the tension rising like dust in the wind. Mothers pulled children back, shopkeepers leaned against their doors, and the preacher's hands trembled on the Bible he held close to his chest. Nobody wanted blood, but everyone knew blood was close. The rancher's jaw tightened, his boots crunching on gravel as he moved closer, his voice steady, low, and heavy as the desert heat. "This town runs by respect. Put that razor down and move along." The stranger holding the blade smirked, tilting his head. He was young, too young to remember the bloodshed of the past, but his eyes burned with the same wild fire. "Respect," he echoed. "Respect is shaved away, just like this." And with one long stroke, he slid the razor down his cheek, the rasping sound loud enough to make the crowd flinch. The act wasn't violent, but it was provocative, a gesture meant to cut deeper than skin. The rancher didn't move right away. His mind raced, not just about the strangers but about what their presence meant. If they were truly back, then the West was about to see a storm that no sheriff, no preacher, no cattleman could easily stop. He froze because in that single act of shaving, he saw the message written clear as a brand on cattle hide. They were here to strip the town of order, to start small rebellions until chaos reigned once more. And though the crowd watched with fear, the rancher's silence spoke louder than any warning. He wasn't a man who froze often, but when he did, it meant the land itself was about to shift. The strangers knew it too. They had succeeded in making him pause, and that pause was as dangerous as a gun half drawn. Behind the stillness, a question burned in every mind. Would the rancher fight to protect the fragile peace of the town, or had something in his frozen stare revealed a darker truth, that perhaps even he feared what these strangers represented? The moment stretched like a noose in the sun. The rancher's hand hovered near his belt, not for a gun but for steadiness, a grounding gesture. He had seen enough men cut down by hasty bullets to know that speed did not always mean strength. The crowd waited for him to speak, but instead, the silence was filled by the stranger's laughter. It wasn't loud, it was jagged, like broken glass under boots. Their leader, if you could call him that, snapped his fingers, and another man sat down on the crate, ready for his turn under the blade. The barber himself, an old man with trembling hands, stood by the church steps, his face pale. His livelihood was being mocked in broad daylight, his role as caretaker of grooming stripped from him. But it wasn't only his shop at stake. Everyone knew that if these strangers got away with this defiance, more would follow. Today it was a shave, tomorrow it could be looting, torching, or worse. That was the unspoken truth hanging in the air, pressing down on every chest. The rancher took a slow step forward. He wasn't just thinking about the strangers. He was thinking about his past. The scar on his ribs from a knife fight in Abilene, the graves of men who fell in the last outlaw war, the years spent trying to build a life free of chaos. He froze earlier not because of fear, but because of recognition. He knew their kind. He knew that fire in their eyes. It was the same fire that had burned his brother to the ground when they crossed paths with the Brotherhood decades ago. The townsfolk began to murmur, whispers rippling like uneasy wind. "Sheriff ain't here. What if they don't stop?" One man muttered. Another, clutching his wife's hand, hissed, "That rancher better do something, or we'll all pay for his hesitation." But the rancher heard every word. He knew that in moments like these, one wrong move could brand him either a coward or a savior. And both labels could be fatal. Then, something shifted. The woman who had first spoken, the one who whispered, "They wanted to shave in the middle of town," stepped closer to the rancher. Her voice was quiet, meant for him alone. "They're not just mocking you. They're marking territory. If you don't stop them now, this place won't be yours anymore." Her words pierced deeper than the laughter of the strangers. She was right. The act wasn't about grooming. It was a ceremony, a ritual of defiance. The rancher raised his voice then, deep and unyielding. "I'll give you one chance. Fold your razors, pack your crates, and walk out before sundown. No one will follow, no one will stop you. But stay another minute in this street, and you'll answer not to me, but to the ground you stand on." His words echoed, rolling through the town like distant thunder. The stranger, with the razor, chuckled, his blade glinting in the sunlight. He leaned into the mirror, dragging the steel along his jaw as though mocking the rancher's authority. Blood welled slightly on his cheek, but he didn't flinch. He wiped it with the back of his hand and flicked the drop into the dust. "This ground belongs to no one," he hissed. "And today, it's ours." Gasps broke through the crowd. The rancher's hand twitched. He hadn't drawn steel yet, but the tension coiled around him like a rattlesnake ready to strike. He saw the arrogance, yes, but behind it, he also saw the desperation. These weren't men who wanted peace, they wanted spectacle. They wanted to provoke, to prove to the world they still existed. And if he gave them blood, they would gain what they came for. For a moment, the rancher considered walking away. Let them shave. Let them humiliate themselves in the dust while the town laughed it off. But he knew laughter would fade quickly, replaced by fear. The next time, they would shave with blood instead of whiskers. And then the town would look back on this day and wonder why he hadn't stopped them when he had the chance. That thought hardened his spine. He exhaled slowly, tipping his hat back so the sun lit his eyes. His voice was calm now, but colder, sharper than the blade in the stranger's hand. "You think this is about razors. But I see the truth. You're carving a scar into this town. I won't let that happen. You'll put that blade down now, or I'll bury it with you." The crowd held its breath. The town balanced on a knife edge between rebellion and reckoning.